I read one book about a person from Massachusetts, Waltham, Massachusetts. He wrote a diary later on of his experience in World War II aboard a cruiser. And they would, in the Pacific, where the New Jersey was a lot of times, he said they would be in these gun turns, 20 millimeter gun turn, 12 hours duty. They would toast in there, during the day. Just 60, 70 pounds, just waste away. That was it. Well said.
And you're going to look at Tom the whole time.
Look at Tom, okay.
Hello, today is June 20th, 2001. My name is Dr. Tom Bannett.
Oops, sorry.
I'm starting again, I just kicked the dumb thing.
You know what? I'm getting a lot of noise from that microphone. And I need a second or two at any time.
Hello, today is June 20th, the year 2001. My name is Dr. Tom Bannett from Kane University, and I'm working with Mr. Paul Lobauer of Pro Media Digital Media Production of Mount Laurel, New Jersey. Today we're aboard the USS Battleship New Jersey, which is stationed at Camden. We're talking with Mr. Sam Masterogiacomo of Sewell, New Jersey, who retired as a Master Sergeant in the Air Force, but who served aboard the Battleship New Jersey. Sam, let's start off by asking, how did you get involved in the Battleship New Jersey if you were a Master Sergeant in the Air Force later on?
Well, right after Pearl Harbor, about a week later, I got the call to, I had an application a year before to get a job at the Navy Yard here, and being I was so close to the Navy Yard, living in South Philly, I was like about a mile away from the Navy Yard gates, and I got called right after Pearl Harbor, and I was delighted to get the job here. And I was hired as a shipbuilder trainee, and they put me on to New Jersey as was a little more than the kill. The kill was being laid, and I felt like, well, I'm doing something for the war effort, and I was happy about that.
So your specific job aboard while building a ship was what specifically?
I was a shipfitter trainee.
Shipfitter trainee.
And
what does a shipfitter do?
they line up wherever they put the bulkheads up and the frames, and they carefully line them up and predetermine the markings, and then the welder tacks it in position. Then the welders come along and weld this right in place, and a lot of parts are built into a big hangar, and it was a prefab parts, and this huge crane would lift up the parts and lay it right onto the ship. And a predetermined, well, a shipfitter made sure that it was lined up where it's supposed to be and tacked in position. And a lot of it is grinding, chipping, and I come aboard here. The first time I came aboard, I went to look at different parts where I worked. And one of the jobs I had where the armor deck was below, the second deck is 8 inches of armor piercing deck. And it seems like I worked that hour after hour just grinding the hatchways so that the hatch would fit into place. And we'd try it out, and we'd see the high spots where we had to grind, and we'd grind it. And it seemed like hour after hour, like 8 hours, just grinding the hatch. I remember that more than anything else. And I still look at the hatch where I worked.
Which hatch was it?
It's about midship, right below the main deck, which is the armor piercing deck, 8 inches of steel.
Can you still see your marks?
And I still see where I worked. Yeah, and it was all heavy work and all hard work, because the grinder itself weighed about 45 pounds, and we just keep on grinding until we had 90% of the fit that I guess I had to be sailed in case the ship took on water, got hit. They would close that hatch, and water wouldn't come below that, through that.
How long did you do this work for? How many months?
Well,
year?
I did that. I was started right the week after Pearl Harbor, and I worked there till 42 of November. I went into the Air Force, and I went to the recruiting station in Center City, and I had the application for my mother to fill out because being under 21, you had to get your parents' signature. So somehow the officer, one of the officers, Navy officers on the ship, called me in, and he said, "I understand you want to go into the military." I said, "Yes, I feel like I want to do more. I want to do more than just build. I want to take part in it." He said, "You know, the ship is being made, and it's important that ships get built, and you got a deferment. You don't have to go into the service." I said, "No, let the older people do the work. I want to go where the action's going to be." And I enlisted in the Air Force. I always wanted to fly, and that's what I did.
And you stayed in the Air Force for how many years?
After World War II, I got in the reserves. Immediately after, when I got discharged, I got in the reserves, and I got called during the Korean War, but I didn't go to Korea. And then I got called during that Cuban crisis in active duty, and then I had a lot of short tours active duty. I was still in flying. This time I was a flight engineer. Before that, I was a bomber gunner in World War II. So I stayed in until '77. So
It was a long career in the Air Force.
yes.
Let's move back to the battleship New Jersey. Tell us what it was like working aboard the ship every day. What about any camaraderie among workers, experiences you had that were interesting?
Well, like there was a lady here right before me, and she said, and I agreed with her, that they didn't know she was a lady because with their coveralls on, and especially in winter, they had the heavy clothing on and the welding. She was a welder, and with the welding mask on and on the top of her head, people didn't care if she was a woman or not. They didn't even notice. And she was a welder, so.
Did you know that there was women aboard working as welders at the time?
Yeah, I did. I did, but we didn't have any what you would call sexy women, because they're all workers.
Mm-hmm.
And
so you very well might have ran into Mabel McCrae, who was just speaking here several
Yes.
minutes ago. Very interesting.
And
What was the daily routine like aboard the ship while you're building it?
it was a lot of waiting. A lot of times they say, well, "Wait here. The section is being built, and in the shop is ready to come over. It should come over in an hour or so." And sometimes we would have to wait a half a day before the section came in. And in the meantime, you had to look busy. You had to do something because all your bosses, they had naval officers on the ship, plus your bosses, and you always had to look busy like you're doing something, even if you had to sweep the deck, take the dirt off the deck or something, and scoop it up in the pans. And I remember being so cold that in the winter time that you just seemed like the chill would come from the bottom of your feet and to your head. And then in the summertime it was worse because the deck would be so hot you could fry an egg on it. And everything you touch, baked in the sun, it felt like it was as if it was come out of a grill.
And as a welder in the summertime, you still had to wear the protective equipment over your face and over your body?
We always had to have helmets all the time and safety glasses. because there was a lot of chipping going on, and there was a lot of welding and sparks flying around. And they always had a fire watch. One of our jobs would stand by for the fire watch or the welder in case anything would catch on fire. And we had an extinguisher right in our hand waiting if anything caught on fire. And at that time, it seemed funny, but we didn't have anything electrical on the ship. Everything was by a pneumatic, air power, and all your drilling was air drilling. You had to use an air gun, and nothing electrical. And I think about today, they got these electric drills, portable electric drills that are battery operated, but we never had anything like that. And that would be the ideal thing.
So if you're doing some work ship fitting with a grinder in your hand, was that grinder, how was that powered?
The grinder was air powered.
Air powered?
Yes.
So that was a very heavy instrument.
Yeah.
You said it was 45 pounds.
Yeah.
You must have built up some strong arms in that.
And I built my arms, I'll tell you.
What was it like as the ship's being built from the keel upward? Did you start at the lower part of the ship and work upwards? They put pieces together and you
we started by the keel, and at that time we didn't have the ship. We only had two dry docks, 1 and 2, and while we're building the ship, it was on a runway, on a run that went into the river, and dry dock 3 and 4 was being built. And it would have been much easier to build in a dry dock, but being on an angle, just like a sled going right into the river, everything had to be built on a 15 degree angle.
In other words, to allow for the angle of the
Yeah.
ship.
Everything had to be
That's interesting.
built to
Did
the 15 degree angle.
complicate or slow down the construction of the ship? Were mistakes
Well,
made?
everything was measured. Whenever we put any section up, it was carefully measured. And it seemed like day by day you wouldn't see the progress, but if you would blank your mind out and see what the thing looked like 2 weeks before, you'd see the progress. Like if you had been away for a week or two, you would see the progress, but day by day you wouldn't notice it. In fact, it was amazing that the ship was started to be built was right after Pearl Harbor. The keel was laid during Pearl Harbor. They attacked on Pearl Harbor, and then exactly 1 year later, the ship was ready to get a crew aboard.
What was the attitude of the people working aboard the ship towards the ship and towards the war?
Everybody was busy, and I felt that the American people really got together, and it was amazing how everybody got together to win this war. And like they built ships and airplanes at an amazing rate. It was unbelievable. Just for instance, the bomber that I was in, the B-24 Liberator, they built 1,700 of them. It was built more than any other airplane ever was built. 1,700 bombers, B-24s. It was amazing. And the ship was built, in a year's time, the ship was complete. 45,000 pounds of metal.
How many people were working on the ship at a time? You were 500, 1,000? Do you have any rough estimate?
It seemed like we had about 2,000 or 3,000 people working on one time.
At one time, and that would go 24 hours
including
a day?
all the fabrication shop that put the different parts together, and that big crane that they had. I forget the name of it. It's down now. That would lift big parts and put it right in place, and it had to be exactly right in the same spot. The spots on the deck where it's going to be put together. We'd have center punch marks with red circle around, just so it was built right within a 1/16 of an inch.
Were you there the day the ship was launched? That went down the
No, I
skids?
already was in the
You were
military.
in the military already.
Yeah.
Did you hear about that while you were in service?
Oh, I was overseas when I heard about it, and I bragging to my buddies, that's the ship I worked on. And they were amazed.
Anything so far that I haven't asked you that you think is important to talk about? Because I'm not always sure which questions are important questions. Is there anything I should have asked that you want to talk about?
Well, I think the camaraderie to the people who worked on it, we were all busy, and the whole idea we're going to win this war, we're get this war over with, and that's all on mind. We're going to make the enemy pay for what they did, especially the Japanese.
Did you ever, while you're working on the ship, talking about the enemy, was there ever any fear of sabotage, spying that you had to be aware of that they talked to you about?
It seemed like everybody was really bent on win the war, and if we seen anything out of the way, we'd notice it right away. Mm-hmm. And in fact, one time, this was after the war, and they were lining up the shaft for the propellers, and there was a fine wire that ran from the fore to aft of the ship, just where the propeller shaft's going to be, and it was a tight wire, and somebody had come along and with a cigarette lighter or something and burned the wire. And I think just for mischief. We didn't think of it being a sabotage, but it looks like it was just somebody did it for mischief.
So they just had to reset that wire. So
They had to
drop the
was
shaft.
quite a job to reset that wire and run it from the whole length of the ship, where the propeller's shaft goes through.
Do you think it was a solidly built ship, based on your
Oh.
experiences?
Nothing. It was built so well, and it was amazing how. Yeah, I look at it today, and here it is. It's almost 60 years later, and the ship is just as solid as could be. I mean, I don't think any country had the know-how and the hard workers to put it together like we had.
Now, once you left the ship, just for a few minutes, you went into the Army Air Force, and you became a door gunner on B-24s flying boxcars?
I was a tail gunner.
Tail gunner. Some experiences about that. Could you relate? Several experiences as a tail gunner.
It seemed like I was young and kind of a little crazy, and we wanted to get this war over with, and I picked one of the most dangerous jobs as a bomber gunner, and we carried the fight to the enemy long before the ground troops made their invasion, and our whole job was prepare for the invasion, and we bombed all their factories and the railway yards and their submarine pens, ship building pens.
And this was in Europe against Germany and Italy.
Yes.
Right. Any
And-
personal experiences while you were in that tail gun?
Oh yeah, I was on one mission that our bomb group got the Presidential Unit Citation. We had 25 airplanes over the target, and 13 got shot down.
Which target was that? Do
It
you
was
recall?
Gotha, Germany. We went to bomb a German aircraft factory that produced the Messerschmitt, and we bombed the target so accurately it was almost 90% destruction. And I remember the day it was snow on the ground, and the airplanes that come right out of on the ground, the German aircraft, they were lined up in front of the factory being ready to be shipped out. And we practically destroyed that whole target area. And but we paid. We lost more than half. We lost 13 out of 25 of our bombers. And I lost some of my good buddies.
What caused those bombers to be shot down? Anti-aircraft fire?
It was-
Fighter pilots coming in?
We always had anti-aircraft fire, but I never worried about that because if you get hit, you get hit. You can't do anything about it, but at least fighter aircraft, you could get the jump on them and get them before they get you. I was credited with three, during the whole war, I was credited with shooting down 3 enemy airplanes.
How'd you go about doing that?
Well, a lot of training. In the States here, we've got a lot of training as an air gunner. You had 3 months of training that it normally would take almost a year, but we had to do it in 3 months. Night and day, we had classes day and night. And before you even got on an airplane, you had all kind of guns you had to shoot. Anything from a BB gun to a 20 millimeter cannon. And you become so quick that it would be nothing for me to snatch a fly right out of the air. Your reflexes so fast. And for instance, when they had a screen that they put enemy aircraft on the screen, and you had to identify within a fifth of a second. And your mind becomes so sharp that, like I say, you can reach out and get a fly that's flying through the air.
So if I can be a little more focused now, if you're actually in combat, how'd you actually shoot one of these airplanes down? Tell us about that. What's happening?
Well, first, when you look, you're constantly looking for enemy aircraft, and what appears to be just a little dot or maybe the size of a bird flying by, as you keep your eye on it, it gets bigger and bigger. Then you identify as an enemy aircraft. And even before they ever got in range, I would give them a little blast, like a 3 rounds blast, just so they know I'm alive and I mean business. So they would get a little cautious too if they seen your guns were waving, and they certainly would know when a certain gun position wasn't moving, and they would come in and attack. But you would have to you got to know the range where you're going to fire, the bullet drop, and you got to give. If the airplanes are diving at you, you got to shoot in front of them, so you're going to hit them at the same time. You got to give it lead, just like shooting clay pigeons. And we got a lot of that in training. So, and you felt like you're part of a 10-man bomber crew, and you're not going to be the weak point, because if you fail your job, the whole bomber is going to go down.
So you would fire a few rounds as aircraft is coming in on you, and then when it approached, you had what, twin 50 caliber machine guns?
Yeah, I was in a tail turret, and I had
Quad?
250 calibers, one on each side.
Oh,
and you had a gun sight, and you had to give it lead. And
what's the effective range of a 50 caliber?
About 1,100 yards.
1,100 yards. So about 1,100 yards, you start picking up the aircraft with your fire tracers.
Well, the tracers were just to get your range. Sometimes you get fooled by the tracers because they're burning uneven, and they would. But we would use it just for range, and the tracers. Every fifth round is a tracer. So actually, like you can't go by the tracers because the tracers would burn uneven and they would tumble and fall and they would. But for range, that was good.
So you pick them up at 1,100 yards and just stay with the aircraft?
Yeah,
fire
right
rate?
on them because.
Constant burst
Yeah.
or 3-5
And if you
round
know
burst?
their nose is gonna point at you. That's where the business end is
That's
coming
where the
from.
cannon is in the
Yeah.
aircraft. Yeah.
And the Germans, they believed in those 20 millimeter cannons, and they had 4 on the fighter craft, and we had 50 calibers, which was a little smaller, but pretty effective.
So you got 3 of them. That's interesting.
I did get 3 credit, yeah. And I might say that a lot of people say, well, you shot at it, you must have got it, but to shoot, when you shot at an airplane and if you thought you got him, that wasn't enough. Somebody else in the crew had to confirm it. Or you had to see the pilot bail out or the plane go out of control. But a few airplanes I hit and I seen pieces come off of it, like cowling, but I couldn't get credit for it because I didn't see the pilot bail out or flying out of control. So when you got credit for an airplane, you surely got it because you had to get it confirmed. Some planes had maybe 1 out of every 10 airplanes had a gun camera. When you shoot the guns, the camera would go off automatically, and that would show if you got a hit or not. But we only had them like maybe 1 out of every 10 airplanes had a gun camera. Of course, the fighter aircraft always had gun cameras on it.
So you stayed in World War II until the very end, then?
Yeah,
Till
I
the
did
end,
say.
1945, August 45. In the
1945, I did get out.
Japanese. Then you got out and stayed in reserves.
Yeah, I got in the reserves.
How does this impact on you? Looking back at your work aboard the battleship New Jersey, where you started, and then working as a gunner aboard a B-24, what do you carry with you today? How does that affect you today, many years later?
There's memories, huh? Like that Gotha, especially that Gotha mission, it's embedded in my mind like as if it happened like last week or something. And something like that, when you lose your buddies, you know, there was planes right alongside of it, guys over in my barracks, and they didn't come back.
About the memories of the ship, what do you carry with you from working on the ship?
Well, when I was sitting around and I felt like I needed some exercise. I'm not going to be a concentrator. So one day I read in the newspaper they're looking for volunteers to work on a ship, and I said, well, that's for me.
Battleship, where it is
The
today,
battleship
Camden.
New Jersey
In
when
Camden, New Jersey.
when they did get it, and in January I came down there, filled out an application, and started work right on it, and it made me feel so much better, and I really got active into it. I come here at least 3 times a week, and the fellows you work with, where else do you see the nicest guys?
What do you do aboard the ship now? What are some of the jobs you've had aboard the ship today?
A lot of painting and shipping, mostly. I've worked on polishing brass. I've touched up paint. I've covered up anything that wasn't white. You have to cover with this brown paper and tape. So when they go along painting all the white, they spray paint it, and only the white and the gray and the brown or any other kind of color is not included. Everything else, mainly the sailings and the sides, are white. and you could see the progress. The ship is getting to look so much better since it's been here.
And I bet you paint and scrape many years that you helped put together
Yes.
back in 1942 and 43.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
I ended up being a machinist. I was a marine machinist. After I was I had about a month and a half to go before I would become a shipfitter, a trainee, and I would have been a full-fledged shipfitter in about a month and a half. But I elected to go into the service. But when I come back, I got into the machinist field again. And I got to be a marine machinist. I started working on ships, and then I was a machinist also. And I put 35 years in working for the Navy, so I know ships pretty well.
You're an expert on working down at the Philadelphia Navy Yard.
That's right. Yeah.
Final question, Sam. When people come aboard the ship starting September 1st of this year, what do you think the ship should speak to them about? Tell them. The ship is really in many ways a live object. What should they walk away hearing from that ship?
Well, some of the fellows that were on the ship and were on crew, they believe the ship has a soul. I'm going to believe it. And the pride of the ship, I was so worried that North Jersey would have got the ship, but I'm glad that we got it here. It's right across the river where it was built. And it's a pride, being part of us.
Do you think the pride, people walk off the ship with a sense of pride of America at a certain time in our history and even today? Do you think you still have that pride today?
Yes, I still have that pride.
Yes, you do. Sam, thank you very, very much for your interview. Thank you. Today we've been talking with Mr. Sam Masterogiacomo of Sewell, New Jersey, who worked aboard the battleship New Jersey as a ship fitter and later served as an Air Force gunner in B-24 bombers in Europe.
Sorry.
Sam, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you
Stay
very
there
much.
and I'll get the microphone off of you, Sam.
Okay.
Thanks a lot. And rolling.
Hello. Today is June 20th, the year is 2001. My name is Dr. Tom Bannon. I'm of Kane University. I'm working with Mr. Paul Lobauer of Pro Media of Mount Laurel, New Jersey. Today we're aboard the USS Battleship New Jersey, which is now stationed as a museum in Camden, New Jersey. And today we're talking with Mr. Jerry Augustin of Southampton, Pennsylvania, who served as a Marine aboard the battleship from 1955 to 1959, July 1955 to July 1959. He was qualified as a rifleman, and he served as a captain's orderly. Jerry, welcome. Thanks for talking with us. First question I want to ask is, how did you get to come aboard the battleship New Jersey? How did you end up here?
Well, when I joined the Marine Corps, one of the things I wanted to do was be seagoing. So I just signed up for seagoing, and after I finished all the boot camp and the advanced infantry training, I went to sea school, and New Jersey happened to be in Norfolk at the time, and there were openings, and so I found myself being transferred to New Jersey, and that's how I came aboard.
Tell us a little bit about sea school. What experiences did you have there? How did they train you to get ready to serve aboard a Navy ship?
Well, of course, you didn't know any terminology, Navy terminology, and so you had to learn what the walls are bulkheads, the ceilings are overheads, the floors are decks, the bathrooms are heads, and all that kind of, so you wouldn't be completely out in left field. They taught you all that, a lot of terminology, and then they also got you squared away with your uniforms, because the first time we had a blue uniform. It taught us how they wanted us to wear them.
That was a dress blue uniform.
Correct, that's dress blue, is the blouse and got us kind of fitted up for them. And it was just a lot of what you would be doing aboard, what's shipboard life like. And you'd be in fine quarters. They let us know that right off the bat. You're going to be jam-packed in with other guys, and that's the way you're going to have to live. The small lockers, you got to be organized, you got to be orderly. So you do have room for everything, but if you're not organized and orderly, you won't have room.
Side question, where did you hang your dress blues? In one of the small, long, narrow lockers?
Well,
On a hanger, did you roll up your dress blues?
no, in our compartment, they had a big cabinet went on the wall, and we hung what we used to call was our overcoat. We used to call horse blankets. With that in there, and then our blue blouses and our green. We had also wore a green blouse, and we would wear that hung up in there as well. And all your shirts. Well, I can remember now. Now you're stretching me now.
That's okay.
I believe we put them in our locker, but I'm not positive.
So how much space did you have as an individual board ship? You had your bunk.
Bunk.
You had, how big was your locker besides the general locker for the Marine unit? How big was your wall locker?
It was about maybe that big. That big.
So about 2.5 by
yeah,
3?
Yeah.
Something like that.
And that was it. And all your earthly belongings went in there. And so a series of shelves and things like that. And it just, there was constantly locker inspections and things like that to make sure you were squared away.
So instead of a locker box, you had a locker.
All right, stop. And we're going.
Talking with you, I said before. So you got 3 of them. That's interesting.
I did get 3.